Coming up on Film Nerd by Night.
It's reminding me of 2000s superhero movies. I do plan to see this because it is a Spielberg film. It is a sci-fi, which is my genre. But the one trailer I watched didn't really do anything for me. It looked like, based on the trailers for Toy Story 5, that Disney and Pixar were just going to be tackling this head on and the dangers of screen addiction. But then, now you got the lead actress in the movie kind of insulting a huge demographic. I predict this is going to be a giant flop.
And now, the show.
All right, folks, I'm Cole Powell, musician by day, film nerd by night. And on today's episode, I'm going to be taking a look at the upcoming blockbuster releases for the month of June. Also going to be talking about the news that Clint Eastwood, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, has apparently officially retired. Also, I saw Sheep Detectives, and I'll be reviewing that later on. Before we get into it, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, click the bell notification, follow, whatever platform you're on, do all the things that are promotional and benefit the channel if you like what you hear. Also consider supporting us on Patreon for early access to episodes like these and full-length movie reactions. All right, I'm shooting this June 2nd. I hope to have it out before the first weekend of June. There's two big movies coming out. I'm only really interested in one of those, and that is Masters of the Universe. This is the He-Man franchise. The first He-Man movie's been made in 40 years. I was a little bit young to enjoy the cartoon when it was first out in the 80s, but I had older siblings, cousins who did grow up with that, and I had the hand-me-down action figures. I had a coloring book, and it was something of the holy grail for sci-fi fantasy properties for me growing up in the 90s. When I became an adult and started having my own kids, I used that as an excuse to buy the entire series on DVD, and I watched it with my oldest daughter, the only kid I had at the time. And I was a bit too old to really enjoy it like I would have if I'd have been growing up in the 80s watching this, but I got it. I understood why it was such a big deal and why so many people loved it, and I actually liked it, even though I was an adult and couldn't really appreciate it like I would have had I been a kid in the 80s. But I totally understand it. It was an iconic property. When they announced this movie, my first thought was, oh, they're probably not going to, it's probably going to be terrible. They're not going to be able to do it justice. It's going to be silly. They're just not going to get the formula right. I got to tell you, I've been sold by the trailers. I did a trailer reaction to the first trailer. I've watched the two trailers that have come out since then. And the second trailer I felt like was really the best as far as hooking me with my own personal taste. It was more action-oriented, less humor, but it looks like there's going to be a lot of humor in there. But either way, it's reminding me of 2000s, 2010s superhero movies, which I love those movies, the Marvel stuff. I'm getting some Guardians of the Galaxy vibes here, some Thor 1 vibes here. I love both of those movies. I love the early MCU stuff. And I think this looks right in that wheelhouse. It's kind of a throwback, a little bit nostalgic now, where I know it's crazy to think about that it's 2026 and nostalgia is now 2008, 2010. But that's where we are. And even though it does look like there's going to be some humor in there, I still think that it looks like there's going to be a lot of action, some seriousness, some drama. The perfect recipe for this type of movie for me, for my generation at least. And it looks like they're sticking close to the source material as far as characterizations, even though apparently there's this fish out of water, banished, exiled to Earth, grew up on Earth plot line that wasn't in the original, but maybe it's been in some other adaptation that I don't know about. But even so, I still like the look of it, looking forward to it. And I was expecting this to be tracking really well heading into this weekend, particularly with some positive word of mouth, which isn't uncommon for a movie like this, so take that with a grain of salt. But the screenings of this after the premiere, a lot of critics, positive word on this. For some strange reason, though, it looks like right now it may flop. It's on track for 30 to 40 million at the box office, and it reportedly has a budget, I think, of something like 175 million, which is 170 million according to GamesRadar.com. I'm not sure where they said they sourced this from. Forbes. I didn't see the original Forbes article. But that is certifiable flop territory, or $30 to $40 million domestic opening, unless they can make up internationally. And apparently one of the reasons that it's projected to make so low is Scary Movie 6 that I forgot was coming out. I remember it being announced, like, oh yeah, another scary movie. I've never watched any of the scary movies. Theoretically, I like parodies, but most of the time they're really bad. So I've never checked out scary movie stuff. I also am not a fan of the modern horror genre, which these movies spoof. So it's not a lot for me there. So this wasn't really on my radar, even calculating that it was coming up against Masters of the Universe being released on the same day, that it would be cutting into that box office. But apparently it is. Also, I have noticed that the two theaters that are closest to my house, there are one in two different towns in opposite directions from where I am, about 30 minutes and 40 minutes away. They had not released their Friday schedules, which was a little unusual for during the big summer blockbuster. They at least already had the blockbusters on the docket. They had not released those until today, and one released their schedule for this weekend, and they're not picking up Masters of the Universe. And the other theater has still not released their schedule, so I'm wondering if there's some hesitation here or something with the Amazon distribution that's preventing this from being picked up wide. The whole thing's just very odd, so this may not go to as many theaters as a normal movie of this caliber, like an MCU entry, would go to. So right now, unfortunately, it looks like it's gonna tank. I plan to go see it, even if I have to drive an hour and 15 minutes away to a theater to see this thing, because it just looks so much fun. I love this genre. It, again, reminded me of the early MCU's days that I was a really big fan of. So I'm going to go check this out. But right now, based on the box office tracking, unless there's some really, really positive word of mouth on this, it's shaping up to be a box office flop. And if it ends up being as good as the initial word of mouth is, the positive reactions are, and as good as it looks in the trailers, that's going to be a shame. Next week, we have Spielberg's Disclosure Day coming out. It's June 12th is the release date on this. And this is Spielberg's first sci-fi since Ready Player One, which was released in 2018. So it's been a while, 8 years since his last sci-fi. But I will say, I've only watched one trailer for this movie. And I didn't watch any more because I do plan to see this because it is a Spielberg film. It is a sci-fi, which is my genre. But the one trailer I watched didn't really do anything for me. I don't know. I don't know what it was. It just, obviously it's supposed to be mysterious. And I just didn't, from that trailer, care to unravel the mystery, to go along for the ride, to unravel whatever this mystery is. This is another film that the early reactions are overwhelmingly positive, even more so than Masters of the Universe we talked about a minute ago. People are calling it one of Spielberg's best, a return to form. It's being compared to The Twilight Zone, positively compared to The Twilight Zone, which is one of the greatest science fiction series of all time. It's being compared to X-Files, which is another great series for the first few seasons. The later seasons kind of went downhill. But those seem to be great comparisons. It meshes genres. It's part romance, they say, part mystery. Of course, it's a sci-fi film. It's a on-the-run chase movie, some of the early reactions have said. So it sounds interesting, but again, the trailer just didn't really hook me. I still plan to go see this, particularly with all the positive word of mouth coming out now, which most of this was from critics, and that can kind of go either way in today's world. But it's on tracking for a pretty good haul. Opening weekend is 40 to 50 million, which is not that much higher than the low end's actually the same as the high end's Masters of the Universe, but with Masters of the Universe, it's a much higher budget. Disclosure Day is a much smaller budget film, so it would be considered a hit. 40 to 50 million. If this is good and it gets positive word of mouth, this is probably going to be a box office hit and maybe one of the biggest moneymakers of the summer, possibly of the year. I could see this being, even though the Academy doesn't really like genre pictures because of Spielberg, I could see this getting a lot of Oscar nominations if it's as good as people are saying it is. The next week is Toy Story 5. And I think, two reactions, the reaction to the teaser trailer and the reaction to the first full trailer, and then I've watched the one or two of the trailers that have been released since then. And I got to tell you, the trailer sold me on this movie, and I said that in the reaction. I loved the original Toy Story trilogy. The first movie came out when I was a kid. This was 1995. I didn't get to see it until a year later when it was released on VHS, which was how long the release windows were between theater and home video at the time. And I got a copy for my birthday, and it was just, I was just blown away. I put it on repeat and just watched it over and over and over again. I knew every line from the movie. Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3, great follow-ups. I felt like Toy Story 3 was the perfect closer to the trilogy. Afterward, they made some short films. Toy Story of Terror was one, which I thought was great, and it didn't undercut the end of the official theatrical trilogy. They did another one that was something with dinosaurs. I don't think I ever watched that one. They made some shorts that were also really good. And they were just kind of addenda to the original trilogy. And they were really well made. When they announced a fourth movie, Toy Story 4, I thought this sounds like a cash grab. It's probably going to be terrible. And I was right. Toy Story 4, I thought, was pretty bad. It may have worked as a 20-minute special like the Toy Story of Terror did, but as a full theatrical film, it did not justify its existence, and it undercut the ending of the original trilogy with Toy Story 3, which I thought was the perfect ending. So when they announced 5, I thought, well, this is why they're doubling down on this. The previous one was a disaster. Narratively, this just seemed like another, let's try this again and try to make even more cash. But these trailers, they really sold me, and they sold me because it seemed to be a commentary on the dangers of tech addiction and the war between physical toys and playing outdoors or being inside on electronics all day for children. And as a father of 5, that really resonated with me because I have seen firsthand the dangers that electronics pose to the young developing minds. And a few years ago, somebody gave some of our younger children little kitty tablets like the one that's being featured in Toy Story 5 as the villain. And we put limits on it. It's 30 minutes a day. But even with that, when the 30 minutes was over, our kids would start getting angry and irritated that they had to put this down. And because that, was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. So they no longer use the tablets, and there are very strict rules. No TV in the mornings, only in the afternoons, evenings. You play outside when the weather is good as much as possible. Screen limits, all these things. And there's all kinds of studies coming out showing what kind of deleterious effects these screens have, particularly on young children and adults too. And I've tried to minimize my screen time as well, because I've noticed that even me as an adult, fully formed brain, that I've gotten addicted to checking my email, that I've gotten addicted to checking news headlines, that I've gotten addicted to, oh, I'm working on this all the time, I need to go, let me work this, and there's this dopamine hit that you get when you finish some kind of digital task. And it's a really big problem. And it looked like, based on the trailers for Toy Story 5, that Disney and Pixar were just going to be tackling this head on, and that this kitty tablet called LilyPad was going to be the villain, and it was the toys against tech. And it looked like they were getting into the dangers of screen addiction and how kids need to play with physical toys and get outside more and touch grass, as they say. But then, in that reaction to the first full trailer I did, I said that as good as this looked and as much on board as I was with what I'd seen so far, I could easily see the filmmakers whiffing on this issue and kind of coming to ending the movie on a note of, well, actually, the tech is fine and it's not going anywhere, so we can't do anything about it, so we just need to embrace it. Yeah, maybe we can do some things kind of mitigate any kind of negative impact on it, but overall, it's fine for kids to be half the time playing with physical toys and outside, half the time on their tablets playing video games or whatever. And sure enough, it looks like that's exactly what they're going to do based on the comments from the film's directors, Andrew Stanton, and the co-director, McKenna Harris, who I do not know. I don't know if McKenna Harris has done any new Pixar, but Andrew Stanton is old school, great director, did some of the really great Pixar films from back in the day. But they were talking, I'm reading this from Variety, they were asked about this piece of technology, this kitty iPad, this LilyPad, it's called in the movie, being the villain of the piece. And here's what Stanton said. She is to the toys, she is the villain to the toys because they're understandably intimidated. She's just the next phase in Bonnie's life. She's built like a toy in the sense that she wants to help the kid go forward, but she's got very different skills and zero experience, whereas Jessie has nothing but experience and is probably unprepared for what to do. So that automatically sounds like, well, this is actually a good thing. This piece of technology is a good thing, not really a villain, maybe just misunderstood from the toy's perspective. And Kenna Harris went on further, said that there were discussions within the studio about whether or not LilyPad should be a villain. Lots of people at the studio want her to be a villain, which I totally get. And it was so hard to strike the balance because I think we all come in with such loaded emotions towards devices. At the end of the day, it never made sense. Harris emphasized that the filmmakers wanted those feelings to be anchored in reality. We're not getting rid of these devices no matter how hard we try. I'm always going to have my phone. I'm probably going to be partially addicted to it. So it felt right for the toys to have to grapple with that nuance. So that's very disappointing to me. And there's just picking apart what McKenna Harris said here. Lots of people in the studio want her to be a villain, which that's promising. That's good because obviously there were a lot of people involved in this like, no, this is bad. And they're correct. But McKenna Harris says that it never made sense because the devices are always going to be with us. We're always going to have them. So she admitted that she's always going to have her phone, that she's probably always partially going to be addicted to it. That's not good. If you recognize that, you need to try to fix that, to try to get away from that addiction. Addiction is not a good thing. That means an addiction means you're a slave to something. On top of that, we're talking about kids here. We're not talking about adults. It would be one thing if we're talking about adults. But again, I mentioned earlier, there's all kinds of studies coming out on how bad screens and devices and games and apps are for the kid brain. And instead of making a movie that they had an opportunity to make here to come out swinging against this issue and try to, sure, you can say, well, it's a lost cause. We're never going to, the kids are always going to have these, which may not be the case. That may not be the case. But even if you believe that, you could at least try to put a movie out that maybe gets parents and kids thinking about the dangers of the electronic devices in lieu of playing with physical toys, going outside, playing with sticks. I mean, that's what I had when I went outside. If I was inside, I had action figures. If I was outside, I had sticks and pine cones and was, active and playing as much as I could. But instead of going that direction, it looks like, which is what I feared whenever I reacted to that trailer, they're going to try to split the difference and say, well, the toys think she's a villain because they really don't understand. And yeah, there's some dangers here, but ultimately it's going to be an integration of the tech and the toy, and everything's going to be fine. Based on these comments, that's what I'm getting. And if that's the case, this is one parent that's really disappointed. I'm still probably going to go see the movie because I am interested in it. I'm also doing this podcast about movies, about new movies, try to see as many as I can so I can review them. But I probably won't be taking at least the number of kids that I originally planned to, because I don't want them to be getting a message from a movie that these electronics are okay and it's fine, when we have personally had problems with that in our house and had to take steps to try to mitigate some of that damage, some of that addiction, addictive tendencies, behavioral problems that seem to be coming from that. I might take my oldest daughter, who's a teenager, who understands how all this works, but the smaller kids, don't think I'm going to be able to do it. So we'll see. As far as box office, this thing is looking for a massive haul. $150 million U.S. opening prediction right now, which is huge for any movie. If it hits that, it's going to be huge and maybe the highest grossing film of the year. So this is basically, at this point, box office proof. It's gonna make bank, even if parents like me aren't happy with the message of the movie, of what the message apparently is going to be. All right, then the next week, and this is going to be I think this is the last weekend in June, is Supergirl. And guys, look, I'm a huge comic book movie fan. That's my favorite subgenre, has been, historically at least. I used to take days off of work whenever I worked outside the house, had a day job. I used to take vacation days on the opening day of whatever big comic book movie was coming out just to go see it. And I do the same thing with Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever. And I've always been a Marvel guy, but I don't have a problem with DC. I'm not one of these, oh, DC is terrible, Marvel's way better. No, if DC does some good stuff, I'm like, yeah, that's really good. That's great. I like that. I want to see more of that. Batman was my first superhero that is my first love as a superhero, and then I got into the Marvel, Spider-Man, X-Men, all that stuff. The original Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, classic, still stacks up today as one of the greatest comic superhero movies of all time, even with all the ones we've had in the last 20, 25 years. DC's movies have been really bad for a while. The Dark Knight was the pinnacle. Still, I think, the best comic superhero movie ever. Dark Knight Rises was okay, had some issues with that. That was the last good DC movie I've seen. After that, everything has just been terrible. The last Superman movie, I had high hopes for that. I still haven't seen it. I was originally planning to see it, but I heard too many mixed reviews, and I know that they made a big change with his parents, that they were sending him to be a conqueror, and that just completely undercuts the allegory of what Superman is, that is his religious roots, the Old Testament story of Moses and the New Testament story of Christ. Like, those are parallels in the original Superman story, and now you're gonna gut that. So I just haven't watched it. I probably will. This is set in the same universe that we introduced Supergirl on last year's Superman movie. And I watched the trailer to this movie. I have no interest in it whatsoever. There's nothing in it that appealed to me at all. I did like Jason Momoa looked good as Lobo, but other than that, nothing. I might have checked this out on streaming, and there's still a remote possibility, but after the star Amelia Alcock, who I don't know anything about her. I think she's from Australia, but I don't know anything about her. She made some comments about, apparently there were some people online going after her for what reason, I don't know. Like, I'm not that kind of guy. I don't do that. But in her response to that, she said she was making people mad online whose biography said they were Christians and fathers, and that's great because that means she's making the right people angry. I don't even know like where she's coming from, what that means, because I mean that's my demographic. I'm a father of 5 and Christian. She even said dad of 4. I'm a dad of 5 and a Christian, and she I don't know why we're really that mad at her. I don't know what she's talking about, but I don't know why she would want to say that she's glad that she made that demographic angry, just strictly from a business perspective, a box office perspective, because Christian dads are a huge part of what has made comic book superheroes successful, because we grew up on that stuff in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and we're the ones with the money and going to take our kids, and making comments like that. Yeah, that's not really a smart business decision. And apparently I saw several articles here on the box office tracking for this, but I couldn't find a primary source on this. But right now the box office is not looking good for this movie, and looking even worse after those comments came out. It's looking like it's going to make between 47 and 65 million, which is really low for a film of this caliber, particularly for a budget which is like 175 million, estimated 175 million, and marketing costs estimated for another 75 million. So a domestic opener for 47 to 65, not good. I predict this is going to be a giant flop. I really do. It didn't look appealing, and now you've got one of the lead actress in the movie making some questionable comments, kind of insulting a huge demographic that would have come out to support this movie, even though they were kind of hesitant. They're definitely not going to now. So yeah, I think this is not looking good, and it's also not looking good for James Gunn's rebooted DC universe, particularly after the first Superman underperformed. Of course, there's debate about that, of whether Warner Brothers considered it underperforming or not. The fact is, it didn't earn as much as Man of Steel did, even without adjusting for inflation back in 2013. Of course, you can make all these arguments. Well, that was pre-pandemic box office, and you have to treat it differently now. And the streaming wasn't that big then, and now it's everybody's streaming. So I don't know. All I know is it did not do as well as previous installments, and this one looks like it's going to do even worse, and way worse at that. So we'll see. So that is most of the major movies, the ones I'm interested in talking about anyway, that are coming out in the month of June. As far as this past month, we already kind of got kicked off here with the summer movie season. It really starts earlier every year, it seems like, because we had Project Hail Mary was kind of really the first summer blockbuster, but it was actually in the spring, fairly early in the spring. One movie that came out last month that I was interested in, shockingly, I was interested in, and I went to see it. It was called Sheep Detectives. This is with Hugh Jackman. And I saw the trailer in theaters. It's based on a novel, a German novel published in 2000 something, I can't remember. And the premise is Hugh Jackman is a modern day shepherd in a small rural English town. He's very eccentric, and every night he reads his flock of sheep a mystery novel. And spoiler alert, first 10 minutes of the movie, they basically spoil this in the trailer. He gets murdered, and the sheep set out to solve the murder. Offhand, just on paper, that description, this sounds like an unmitigated disaster waiting to happen. It's like, who writes this stuff? Who's coming up with this stuff? This is crazy. This is ridiculous. Yet there was something about that trailer that really hooked me, that I thought, Actually, I think this may be pretty good. So, I went on vacation Memorial Day weekend, saw the film, passed over Mandalorian Grogu, and it exceeded my wildest expectations. It was charming. It was funny. It had theological and philosophical depth, and they didn't even skimp on the mystery elements. It actually had a really good whodunit mystery plot with a twist ending, and I was just blown away. It was absolutely delightful. Hugh Jackman, of course, always great, even though he's not in the movie much because he dies toward the beginning of the film. There's some flashbacks, though, to get a little bit of that. His voice, he's basically doing a Michael Caine impersonation, which I think went over really well. There were a couple of newcomers that I didn't know maybe they'd been in. I didn't really look them up afterwards, but there was two of the lead guys other than Hugh Jackman, Nicholas Braun and Nicholas Galitzine. Not sure how to exactly pronounce that name. They're both a couple of British actors. The former played the police chief who's investigating the murder. The latter played a reporter that has come to town looking for his first big story. And he is actually in He-Man. He is He-Man in the Masters of the Universe. They did great jobs with their respective characters. Emma Thompson's also in this. She is always magnetic. Just phenomenal. She plays Hugh Jackman's lawyer. The humor it's light, it's clean, but it also provides incisive commentary on complex human issues. And there's one particular theme that's introduced early in the movie, and they kind of bring it to a close toward the climax. And this is a little bit of spoiler territory here. The sheep in this universe, or at least Hugh Jackman's flock, don't believe in death. And for humans, they think that it's strictly fictional, that it's only in the books that Hugh Jackman reads. They don't think humans actually die. For their own species, for sheep, they think instead of dying, sheep become clouds, and that's their idea of what would be an afterlife, or at least after life on the ground on the earth. And the reason they believe this is, or the reason they're able to keep believing this, they're born with the ability to willfully forget anything. So what happens is when they actually witness a sheep in their flock die, because they don't want to live with the pain, and because they don't want their worldview shattered, that their belief that the sheep becomes clouds is false, they willfully forget the existence of the sheep. So they never have to deal with the pain. They don't have to know that the sheep actually died and didn't become a cloud. And there's one sheep in the story that they established at the beginning of the movie that I guess he's supposed to have like some kind of genetic defect. He can't do that. He doesn't have the normal ability to willfully forget. He remembers everything. So he knows that death is real. He knows that people die. He knows that sheep die. And he basically has the burden of carrying on the charade for these other sheep, because he doesn't want them to know that they've willfully forgotten all these other sheep that have died. Or they establish, they basically make him promise not to reveal anything that they've forgotten. So when Hugh Jackman's character dies, that's kind of the first challenge to their worldview. Like, oh, this is real. Humans die. That's in real life. That's not just in the books. And then later in the movie, it's a little bit of a spoiler, one of the sheep dies. And one of the other main sheep, this is the sheep voiced by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who just does a great job. Bryan Cranston is also one of the sheep. I'm not sure why 2 English sheep have American accents, but whatever. It works fine. Also, Patrick Stewart voices one of the sheep. But Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, who's the main sheep, she's supposed to be the smartest sheep in the world. She has to come to terms whenever she witnesses this other sheep die, and she finds out from the sheep who can't forget anything, voiced by Chris O'Dowd, that she's seen many sheep die. And she has to come to a choice. Does she continue to forget so she doesn't have to live with the pain? Or does she accept death and learn to grieve and mourn and grow and heal? And spoiler alert here, she realizes that while forgetting erases the heartache, it also erases the good and it buries the truth. Really great stuff there. Way more philosophically deep, theologically deep than it had to be. And this is it's a completely family friendly flick. There was nothing that I found objectionable in the film. There was no language, there was no innuendo. There was one scene, I mentioned that it got in some theological discussion. There's one scene where they're talking about the nature of God the sheep are. I can see some maybe find offense to that. I didn't think it was offensive at all. I actually thought it was really good because it was kind of humorously done, but it was also had serious points that I agree with and believe are true. It's the kind of movie that you can take your kids to, and we don't have a lot of those. And it was reminiscent of 50s and 60s Disney family comedy flicks. And I'm not sure if my younger kids would really be that into it because it may be a little bit too live actiony for them. But my older kids, I would definitely take to this, and that they would enjoy it. And if I took my younger kids, or if I turned it on and my younger kids were in the room, there would be an issue because it is absolutely clean. And there's plenty for the parents and the kids. A perfect family movie. And the Agatha Christie element to this, the classic whodunit element, just elevates it to another level. I thought that this was great. Unfortunately, it is not doing well. Last I looked, I haven't checked this week's box office, but last I looked, it had done $66 million worldwide, which is abysmal, and it had an estimated $75 million budget. It is about, if it hasn't already been buried, it's about to be buried. The day I went to see it, which was now a little over 2 weeks ago, it was obviously not a priority for the theater to screen. It was the last screen at the end of the building in an 18-screen auditorium, and only been out like 2 or 3 weeks at this point. And apparently somebody forgot to start running the commercials and previews, and I was the only person in the theater, which I saw at 10 o'clock in the morning, but still it was a decent-sized theater, decent-sized city on a holiday weekend. And I sat in there for a little bit. I finally went out and had to talk to the manager and be like, there's nothing playing. And he said, okay, let me check on that for you. And then finally, 25 minutes after showtime, of looking at a blank screen, the movie finally started just before I was about to walk out. So obviously, not doing well, has not been a priority for theaters. And that's a shame because it's a really, really good movie. I highly recommend it if you like lighthearted but smart, quirky comedies that are family friendly. Sheep Detectives was an absolute delight. I give this a 10 out of 10 quality, objective rating, but also a 10 out of 10 on personal enjoyment rating. Absolutely loved this movie. All right, last story for today. This was announced yesterday is when I first saw it. This is coming from 2025, November 2025 interview with Clint Eastwood's son, Kyle, in which he casually mentioned that his father retired, but apparently the English-speaking press did not pick this up. So let's read this here. This is from Consequence of Sound In a newly surfaced interview from November 2025 with the French publication France Info, his son, Kyle Eastwood, revealed that his father had retired from film work. Quote, I have many fond memories of working with him. Now he's retired. He's 95 years old. But I was very lucky to be able to work with him on quite a few films. It was a great experience for me. Eastwood turned 96 on May 31st with 40 films as director to his credit, including Oscar Best Picture winners Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby, both of which also won him the prize for Best Director. So, yeah, that is the end of an era. Clint Eastwood, one of the greatest filmmakers of his generation, of the last, he's been doing this for over 50 years at this point. Not to mention his acting career before that, where he became an icon in the revisionist Western, the spaghetti Westerns. Even before that, going back to Rawhide as Rowdy Yates. Used to watch that when I was a kid on reruns on the Hallmark Channel. He went on to do the Sergio Leone pictures, Good, Bad, and the Ugly. I used to binge that when I was a kid. And sticking with the Western genre, Unforgiven, I think it's just one of the best modern Westerns, because I feel like post-70s, we enter a new era, and that's one of the best Westerns of the era. Just such a great filmmaker, good actor too. I just recently watched Space Cowboys, one of my favorite Clint Eastwood films. It's got a bunch of heavy hitters, legends. It's got Clint, Tommy Lee Jones, James Garner, Donald Sutherland playing a quartet of ex-Air Force pilots, or I don't know if all of them are pilots, but they were in the Air Force that didn't get in the space program. They always kind of resented that, and then they have this chance in the early 2000s to go retrieve this Russian satellite that's running an old system that Clint Eastwood's character had designed. Really good movie, funny, a lot of heart, a lot of humor, also a lot of drama and action at the end. It's got some spectacle there. Really underrated film from Clint, at least for audiences. I think critics liked it, but some audiences didn't really care for it. I don't know why, because it was one of those movies that I felt like just hit on all cylinders. So it's sad as a fan of film and a fan of Clint Eastwood that he's hanging it up, but good grief, 96 years old, what a run. Most of us, myself included, will not be here to celebrate 96 years on this earth, let alone have a prolific career like this, 40 directorial efforts, plus many more that he acted in without directing. Great career. Sorry to see him go, but glad he's going out on his own terms. Congratulations, Clint. And may you have many more years left on this earth. All right, that's going to be all for this episode. Stay tuned. Again, subscribe, like, follow wherever you're watching, listening to this on, and we will see you next time.
Film Nerd by Night, created and hosted by Cole Powell. Theme, Beautiful Now, written and performed by Cole Powell, a Randomine Records production. Section 107 of U.S. copyright law allows for the fair use of copyrighted material for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, parody, or research.